Saturday Live with Carol Dooley on Dublin's new place to relax.
Sunshine 106.8.
Renowned dermatologist and surgeon Dr. Patrick Tracy still joins us. And Dr. Tracy, you treated and you became a personal friend of Michael Jackson when he lived here some years back. You treated him for the skin condition vitiligo, amongst other things. We spoke briefly about how you came to meet Michael. Let's, before we go any further, talk about Dr. Conrad Murray's book. Dr. Conrad Murray, who was convicted of involuntary manslaughter in the death of Michael Jackson, he's just published his book, which contains some rather explosive claims, to say the least. And I personally, I think it's an extremely bad taste that he published this book. Yeah, considering his conviction and everything else.
A bad reaction.
I would have thought so. I would have thought so.
And some of the things he's bringing up are so beyond belief. That Michael approached him to get a brain transplant, and that sort of Michael wanted to get married to an 11-year-old child. I mean, this is total nonsense, just prostituting himself to sell a book. There's not one word in the book I wrote that has anything to do with Michael's medical background. It's just all, sort of stories about, times we had together. But if we look at the reality of this, Conrad Murray couldn't be Michael Jackson's doctor and this is it. He didn't even have a British registration. Do you know what I mean? Nor would he probably get one either. So how could he be working in that jurisdiction? It didn't make a lot of sense. But the thing is that Michael was actually, I don't know whether you know it or not, going to come to Aylesbury within 3 days of when he died,
Was he? For what?
For treatment. Do you know what I mean? Paul Martin, you remember in The Sun, did a big article on it just at the same time. I mean, we never told anybody that Michael was coming to us, obviously, but I mean, his crew had sort of let that out, so that made all the sadder,
You said in your book that you felt very sorry for him. So do you think he was obviously very damaged, wasn't he?
Very damaged after the Santa Maria trial.
Yes.
And then there's a lot of things I know that I haven't sort of mentioned as well. That whole time in Bahrain didn't work out either at all. He was sort of manipulated there, and he almost had to flee the airport without his passport, and the least said about it the better. But that was really out of the frying pan into the fire, So when he came to Ireland, it was almost like a heaven for him, really, and the kids, And the kids were lovely, and they had a great relationship with Michael in the period. I couldn't believe, watching them, that there was any evidence that I would have thought of paedophilia. And I mean, the thing is that I didn't know, and I'd be fair to anybody, but when Michael met me first, I wasn't particularly into his music, or I wasn't particularly starstruck. So, it was only over a period of time when you form almost like a bond with somebody. And not only was he troubled, but he was afraid people were going to kill him, And that was a worry. And I know...
was that paranoia, do you think?
Well, we're a bit closer to home than you'd imagine, Was it paranoia? It's hard to know, sort of... with a couple of drinks, then we'd sort of tell you some things.
Did he drink? Did he?
Yeah, well, we'd have a glass of wine or two, yeah.
And did you like him?
I must say that I sort of grew to like Michael. In some ways, he was a little bit, I suppose, pathetic is the wrong word, but he'd phone you about sort of trivia, many times. No, I did like Michael. There was something, I suppose, about him that he was very intelligent. When you caught him off guard, he was very funny. He was a perfectionist in what he did. He was always wary, I suppose, of the possibility of somebody from the media coming in and destroying his life in Ireland. But still at the same time, he was willing to take a lot of chances. He went around the van around Dublin, with windows being blacked out. But that time he wanted to go into the hospital, I thought that, he would have had the media all around him. They would have known where he was. There was a very close time to the time that he was charged with paedophilia. So I thought it was inappropriate for him going into a hospital. But I suppose I didn't know Michael well enough at the time, because I didn't even know that he went into hospitals all the time to meet kids. I didn't know, for instance, when he was interested in the Murray kids from Limerick because of their burn, that he had his own head burned. Yes. It was only when I sort of...
And he showed you, didn't he? Yeah. And I think that must have been a very traumatic event for... I'm not sure he ever really got over that. That was on the commercial, wasn't it? Pepsi
That's
commercial.
Right. And they sort of put catheters into his scalp to pull it all together and blow it up, and that sort of made a bit of a mess as well.
So as a doctor who has treated Michael Jackson, Patrick, when he died, what was your take on what happened, what might have happened?
Well, Propofol is a very interesting drug, because if you inject somebody with propofol, they'll come round again in about 3.5 minutes. So if you were to inject 10 people, by the time you get to the
And
last
remind
one,
us why you would be injected with that. We've been told that Michael Jackson had problems sleeping.
most drugs, if you want to knock somebody out to do a procedure, you're going to use something like Hypnovel or diazepam or midazolam. But most of those are benzodiazepines, so they just wreck your head. They sort of leave you sedated, and you almost have to, I suppose, reverse them to an extent with something like an Nexate or some of the anti-benzos. Propofol is very different, I suppose, from the point of view that you give it to somebody and they go into a deep plain sleep and then they sort of wake up again, you know, and that's it, all over, you know. So you only induce a problem with propofol if you run it as maintenance. So in other words, you have to pour it into somebody's arm, and then because you're in such a deep level of, I suppose, anesthesia, you're going to end up causing the possibility of apnea, which is lack of breathing, because you can get a respiratory arrest, and then as a consequence of getting no oxygen, you'll end up getting a heart attack or a stroke to your brain. So it's a safe enough drug, loved the world over, just as a quick shot, and somebody wakes up again, and if you need to have them on the sedation for another period, give them a second shot so they're out for 8 minutes or 12. Now, to use it as a sleeping agent, then obviously you have to hang it in a drip. Now, Conrad Murray at the time had said that sort of, you know, he gave him a shot, just 25 milligrams, which we all doubt, and then he went out of the room and sort of, you know, when he came back, you know, later Michael was dead. So he was playing on the fact that if there was a maintenance dose, then Michael must have given another shot to himself and killed himself. But we know there was a bag, an IV, in the room that I'm sure Michael didn't set up, and, you know, there was another bag within the bag that sort of, you know, the propofol was within. So I'm sure what they had done was they sort of hooked up, or Conrad Murray had hooked up, an IV drip, given Michael Jackson an IV dose of propofol running all the time, and then walked out of the room. And you remember he was talking to some of his girlfriends or something for a period of about 20 or 30 minutes, didn't monitor his patient, and when he came back didn't seem to have proper CPR skills for as a cardiologist, which is phenomenal, trying to do it on the bed instead of the floor. He had no intubation equipment, you know, he had nothing to run a code, a respiratory arrest, or a cardiac arrest. So I think he just met a charlatan of a doctor, really. You know, they sort of probably give in to whatever he wanted and probably give him more as well. And you know by the character of this person, by the way they started writing their book now, you know, coming out with all this bloody nonsense, as a consequence of that, you may be damn sure that he did the same thing as a doctor, you know, in the period that he was working with Michael Jackson, you know. I must say, in the period that I knew Michael Jackson, which was a prolonged enough period, I never seen any drugs in his house. He never asked me for any drugs. And the only thing he ever asked me one time was a diet tablet.
A diet tablet?
Yeah, but he's a dancer. They all do this. I worked on cruise liners, and all the dancers want diet tablets, you know. They don't want to put on any weight.
But they're dancing. I mean, Michael, there was nothing to him.
I know there wasn't, but believe it or not, the tablet was a company, and I'm sure I'm not lacking any medical confidence at this stage. And I was in Dubai at the time, and Michael had told me, go into the Emirates Palace. You know, I want a menu from the Emirates Palace. I was in it a few weeks ago and I forgot it, and I said, okay. So I was in Dubai, so I went up to Abu Dhabi, went into the Emirates Palace, got the menu, but while I was there, word came out from the FDA saying a company is going to be pulled because people are having suicide and depression on it. And at the same time he texts me and says, oh, do you think I'll take 2 of these tablets because they're having no effect? I was saying, no, you got to get off them, stop them immediately. So it was a funny thing because there was a Greek delegation over as well, and the Minister of Health had met at a laser conference in Athens just before that, about 2005, 2006. And so I'm in the middle of it, and you know, sort of he's watching sort of the text coming on my phone, and I felt like saying to him, do you know what this is? You know, I mean, the FDA have just pulled something and I've got MJ on
Michael
it at the
Jackson,
same time.
yeah,
you know,
looking for it.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating. I could sit here and chat to you, Dr. Patrick Tracy, all afternoon, but sadly we've run out of time. But of course, everything is in the book, Behind the Mask. And if you'd like a copy of that yourself, just text Patrick, your name and where you are, to 087 11 55 777. 087 11 55 777. And Patrick will definitely have you back in again to talk about cosmetic enhancements and where we go from here. I look forward to that in the not too distant future. Thanks again.
Saturday Live with Carol Dooley on Dublin's new place to relax.
Sunshine. 106.8.